So, the topics that Pyrrho, you wanted to discuss, anything that you really want to nail in this time? Hello, back there.
Guest starring.
No, not in particular. I mean, you'd said some things that those sound like good subjects, but I'm open.
All
right. Well, let's introduce you first as Pyrrho314 over on YouTube. I'm sure many of our Holon's Network viewers are already familiar with your stuff.
Yep.
But if not, let's check out your channel. You've got a collection of videos about a skeptical Pyrrhonian philosophy, right?
Sprinkled with relativism and
right.
heat at the right temperature, and you get a Pyrrho philosophy.
Yeah, you get a really pragmatic and useful approach to the world, I think. So yeah, your videos are definitely worth watching. I guess Nicotine 2 made a recent video about spirituality, and you've made a couple videos about how you would approach spiritual experience. And I think, you can, speak for yourself, but I think your perspective is that there are these experiences we can have when we feel like a part of nature that normally in our rational, waking, egoic state we don't realize is there beneath it. And do you think there are any implications that we can draw from that experience, though, or is it just that it's a mystery and that it is experienced as mysterious but may not necessarily mean anything about nature? So, like, do you think there are implications? Yeah,
I think there's a lot of implications. So, I mean, I think the analogy to lustful feelings is pretty much what I go from, or other kinds of feelings, but lust is a good one, where, yeah, that can be reduced to material reasoning, and it still keeps its poetic wonder. You're still going to write love poems and stuff about, using lust in the most general, also positive sense, just, these kinds of desires that rise up, including the romantic ones. It's still magical and poetic to the human experience, but you also explain it as, well, this is DNA and procreation, and no wonder it's system design. And I think we could reduce spirituality to the same in the same way, and it'll still be magical and poetic and important to the human experience. But I think the main thing is that it's imperative that we address it, because my view is that, like with all study, it starts with perceptions. We have a perception of some kind of thing, and we start to analyze it. And in the case of these affects like lust and hunger and I think spirituality, you can't ignore them. If you ignore them, you'll have some sort of a dysfunction result. If you decide, oh, lustful feelings are bad, and you ignore them, which we have historical example of this, you just become sexually dysfunctional. And it's the same way, I think, with spirits. And spirits function well, that's sort of me misspeaking, but with spirituality, the other thing is, as far as just to summarize, so I give you guys a chance to speak too, of the effect that skepticism has on it, is just that that's why there can't be a spirit world that's separate from this world. If there's ghosts, then they're made of energy, like electromagnetic energy or some energy we don't know about yet. So that's the other effect.
Pyrrho, you probably watched a fair amount of Matt's videos and my videos to try to get some kind of understanding of our perception of spirituality, and then you've also watched your fair share of probably Gary or Mendham's and Nicotine's videos, so you understand what they are kind of coming from, how they're trying to present their interpretation of spirituality. It seems like you might be a nice, healthy, wham bam in the middle kind of approach if people are not really resonating with what Matt and I are talking about, or what Nicotine or maybe Mendham's talking about. But what do you say to people that say that your channel is more like Mendham Light, with that version of spirituality reduced to just, these are nice, pleasant feelings. They feel nice, and it's kind of, that's cool. But it's really just this reduced. We reduce it down to chemicals. That's all that's going on.
What I hear Pyrrho saying is that these experiences are reducible to psychology, but they're not necessarily telling us something that's true of reality, independent of our mind.
Well, that's why I said light. That's why I said Gary Light.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I am definitely a hardcore materialist, and so in that sense, it's like Gary. The difference is that I don't think you can get beyond it. So these still become the big archetypes and gods of the human experience. Okay. Now, as far as being related to reality, no, this is the thing. By making the analogy to lust, I'm saying it's very much related to reality, and it will probably be like in all of our urges when we trace them to reality, it'll be related to some sort of survival technique, some heuristic survival technique, which may or may not have sound principles behind it or our interpretations of it, but that for some reason it worked over millions of years of evolution. That, like, for example, spiritual feelings help us, bond with our environment somehow and make us better able to survive it. Maybe our appreciation just makes it so that we pay closer attention, learn more about it, and survive better. Whatever. Now, you could call that trivial, and there is a triviality to it. Like someone like Gary can go ahead and see, oh, and that's why it's crap. That's all it is. But to me, I don't interpret it that way, because this is still a link to the laws of nature, and that's what makes it material, and it is actually going to turn out to be valuable to listen to.
Right. So I would say that I don't think there is necessarily a Darwinian reason for, or a practical reason, a reason that allows us to survive for spiritual experience. It seems to be completely without any use in what we think of as the material world. Because what it basically, I mean, I guess there are many types of spiritual or mystical experiences, but generally they seem to be about this feeling of absorption and just being awash in the sea of a singular, unitary flow of energy. And that, it may, I mean, I suppose a social bonding, I mean, around that feeling would certainly be a practical benefit.
Yeah.
But it seems that a Darwinian version of evolution, or if you were to attempt to explain something by reference to a Darwinian evolutionary mechanism, anything related to consciousness wouldn't really be explained well by Darwin's theory, because Darwin's description of natural evolution, of biological evolution, could take place independent of any sort of consciousness or experience, especially spiritual experience. It's a completely mechanical, algorithmic process. So it doesn't really seem to explain consciousness or spiritual experience.
Well, go ahead.
So, in that sense, then, is it really, can we just assume materialism is true, even when we have experiences of the mind seeming to extend beyond the boundary of the skull? I mean, that seems to be what a mystical or spiritual experience generally feels like or seems like, right? So, what are we basing our materialism on? It would be based on experience, right?
Yes. I think, well, okay, let's see. First of all, I think consciousness is a tool of survival, but also with evolution and bioevolution, I don't think it's limited to what we think of as the Darwinian approach, especially since we're really talking about Darwin. I mean, did Darwin really comment on this one thing? He says that you're driven by your environment, but what about the role of intention and will and migration? Animals of every size have done amazing migrations, so they choose what environment to be in. So there's a Lamarckian almost element to even a Darwinian theory in that he didn't try to say that there was no choice. He wasn't mechanistic as far as I know about that. He was mechanistic about how you're going to adapt to your environment, but willpower still plays this role, at least in choosing your environment, let alone if there's some other mechanism. Like, we could be authoring our genes more intentionally than we know. It's not really proven. That's totally random which genes you pass on.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a mistake to assume Darwin can explain all of what we see in the biosphere. I think he got an important part of it, but you're right. Lamarck's this understanding of a willful element to the evolutionary process is left out, or it's not left out of Darwin. Darwin just assumes it. Like, these organisms, they want to survive. Therefore, they evolve in this way. But
he just assumes it, right.
Right.
Which is fine, because that means that that assumption is possibly where all kinds of elements can work their way into his system and still be, you know, Darwinian. But also I'm pointing out that, you know, it's a little bit like Freud and psychoanalysis, though I think Darwin was more on the mark than, you know, Freud's been sort of proven wrong a lot, they say. But still, he's, you know, you don't want to look too limited at bioevolutionary reasoning as if it has to be strictly Darwinian or